Welcome to the ZoomInfo Labs podcast. I'm Ben Salzman.
And I'm Millie Beetham.
Today, we're excited to be joined by Sam Jacobs, the CEO of Pavilion and a leading voice in the world of B2B communities. Sam's journey is a masterclass in building and nurturing professional networks, with Pavilion now serving 10,000 members globally.
In this episode, we dive into Sam's experiences building Pavilion, how he transformed setbacks into a thriving business, and what it takes to create meaningful, lasting community in the go-to-market space. He shares hard-earned insights from his career, how AI is shaping business strategy, and why he believes revenue generation is really a team sport. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the ZI Labs podcast. We are thrilled to have on Sam Jacobs, who's the CEO of Pavilion, one of the smartest people I know, and who I think of as sort of the godfather of modern B2B communities. So excited to be here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, we'll get into a little bit about you and some of the things pre-Pavilion and an early career. If you don't mind, start off, just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the world of B2B and go-to-market.
I came to New York for the second time 21 years ago, and I was working and really since then have been in revenue and go-to-market functions at venture-backed companies. The first 7.5 years were at a company called Gerson Lehrman Group, GLG, which went from about 20 million in ARR to about 300 while I was there. And that really gave me a lot of insights into what product market fit looks like and really how to scale and build an organization of some size. Today, GLG does about 650 million in revenue. So, pretty meaningful company. And then from there, I went much earlier stage in more senior positions. And so I was senior at a place called Axial for 4.5 years. Then I was senior at Livestream, which later sold to Vimeo, which was owned by IAC at the time, and then a company called The Muse, and then Behavevox. So over, from really 2010 to 2018, I was a chief revenue officer, SVP of sales kind of person, responsible for the revenue growth of companies that were backed by everybody from Redpoint Ventures to First Round Capital to Edison to, anybody that you can think of. And a lot of things happened on that journey, and many of them, candidly, were not good. After a great ride at GLG, where everything felt pretty easy, I worked at a series of companies that, for a variety of different reasons, just did not have the same growth trajectory that GLG did. And the consequence of that partially was my own career was much less stable than I had expected. I sort of had this idea that when I finally became a senior executive, I would, you'd make a lot of money, you'd work somewhere for a bunch of years, there'd be some kind of IPO or exit, you'd generate wealth. And my tenure, which, I've talked about a lot in public and has been discussed not just by me, my tenure kept shrinking. So I was 4.5 years at Axial, but then I was 18 months at Livestream, 9 months at The Muse, and 10 months at Behavevox. So my last two gigs, both of which were C-suite positions, I didn't even make it a year. And so I felt like there needed to be some kind of connective tissue, some kind of community where people could support each other and help each other within these functions, so that, first of all, you could figure out how to do the job and, what did you need to know? Because as we all know, to the point of this podcast and, the existence of ZI Labs, right? The way to go to market changes, if not by the day, certainly by the week and the month. And so how do you do the job when there isn't really a standard job description? That's a big thing that really the only way to solve that is through community, is through peer support. And then the second thing is, you're going to need some kind of connective tissue. You're going to need to belong to some kind of trade association, some kind of organization, because companies themselves are just not as equipped. We're not all going to go work at IBM or ADP or Oracle and spend 20 years there and get perfectly trained on how to be a commercial executive. There is going to be no company that really does that. So there needed to be something. So I started Pavilion unofficially when I was at Livestream. The first incarnation of Pavilion was called the Brooklyn Sales Meetup because I was commuting out to Bushwick every day. It later became this thing called Revenue Collective, and then it later became Pavilion, changing the name basically. And so what are we today? We are a community of about 10,000 people all over the world. We've got chapters in every major hub where there are high growth companies. And we're really focused on serving go-to-market executives, including CEOs and founders, and helping them both build great companies in a way that we think creates long-term and lasting value. And also, perhaps most importantly, help people navigate their careers more effectively so that at the end of 20 or 30 years, you've got the things that you need. You've got wealth, you've got impact, and you've increased the likelihood that you will have attained all of those things. So that is my background.
It's an incredible mission. And maybe just if you could go a little deeper on maybe the moment when you realized that this was going to be your thing, as opposed to probably based on the name Brooklyn Sales Meetup, it sounds a little more temporary. Like you didn't probably have some maybe 5 or 10 year plan. Can you describe for us the moment when you had that sort of switch to, whoa?
There was not one moment, but there was a series of moments, I suppose. The bigger, if I had to pick one, and it wasn't even related to like the company, it was really related to my personal trajectory. It was Friday the 13th of October, 2017. That was the day that I was fired by from the Muse. And that was the moment. And, there's all these moments of like personal transformation that we all go to or go through. And for me, it was just, I've been fired from Axial. I was fired, in kindly, but still fired from GLG. So I was on this bumpy road, and I wasn't fired from Livestream, but it wasn't a great departure. And so I had this like sort of fork in the road mentally, and it was, I can wallow, and I can go nurse and lick my wounds, or I can use this as a moment to transform myself. And I can't tell you exactly where it came from, but I decided in 2017, I was going to build something that would make me less dependent on, the vagaries and vicissitudes of startup CEOs, most of whom, tend to be younger than me. So, which, I don't have any perspective on age. I'm just saying, less experience sometimes. And so I just decided like I'm going to build an independent revenue stream. And so I did a couple of things. And one of them, because at the time, Pavilion was free. And I said, you know what? I'm going to charge dues. I'm going to call, one of a well-known B2B tech company at the time. My friend Kevin O'Malley was VP of marketing at SalesLoft. And I was going to I called him and said, can you sponsor all these dinners that we're doing in New York? And very quickly, and then I started a consulting business. And very quickly I had, close to $100,000 in pipeline. And on January 1st, 2018, that was the moment that we actually ran the credit cards for the first time for the first 20 or so members of Pavilion. And that, if I had to pick one moment, that was it. And it was when I did one more gig, but Pavilion was running in the background the entire time. And that was just when I realized that I was going to have this thing that could exist that had a lot of benefits. And one of the benefits is that it truly is an organization that, we are trying to do a good thing. We're trying to help people navigate their careers. We're trying to provide assistance. We're trying to help people sleep better at night. So if I had to pick one moment, that would be it. There have been a series of moments, but that was probably one of the more pivotal ones.
Based on that, I'm assuming there were like probably some bumps in the road, maybe some challenges or sort of key milestones. Can you talk about some of those initial years and sort of how you overcame them and sort of move beyond that and how that evolved Pavilion? Yeah.
The first few years, honestly, there's this idea, right, that starting a company is risky, and it's an incredibly risky thing. And my perspective on it is that going into work every day as a CRO, and I can tell you, the last couple of companies, the first 3 months are always the honeymoon period. Everything's great. The first board meeting's always great. But in both of those situations, there was I could almost remember a day when all of a sudden I could just tell that, the clouds had come in and the wind was blowing in a different direction and the storm was, I just could sense something different. And that, let me tell you that is far more anxiety inducing than getting to do your own thing. And so like the biggest fear, the biggest risk I've taken, I realize in hindsight, was working for other people. I'm just not very good at it. And so working for myself is something that comes a little bit more naturally. So at the beginning, honestly, because the goals were so modest, I'm not one of those people, I didn't go to like Stanford GSB and just decide I come from such and such a family. I am predestined to be a great man of the world, and therefore I must be a CEO. Like, that wasn't my journey. My journey was like, I need a job I can't get fired from. If I start my own company, it'll be really hard for me to fire myself. So the first couple, and I remember this moment. I was in Austin, Texas for a couple of months in 2019, and it was only me and one other person working on the company. And she called and said, applications, because it was an application-based membership community, applications were down last week. And I had this brief moment of panic that was sort of PTSD from being a CRO of like, oh shit, are we going to like miss the number? And then I checked myself. I'm like, the only thing I really need to do, I paid for this Airbnb already. Like, if I can pay rent, I'm good. And it was this sense of great relief. So the point is, like, in the first 2 years, 2019 and 2020, where I was working on it full time, things were pretty good, honestly. And it really wasn't, it felt very natural and organic. It was like that clear product market fit of things going up and to the right, very low churn, like hardly any. And I'll tell you when things changed, and they changed 3 years ago when we raised money. And again, what's the story? How did you raise? It's like somebody emailed me offering me a tremendous amount of money. I checked with a couple other people, meaning I shopped the term sheet a little bit, but I wasn't in a raising process because we were a profitable business. So it wasn't a traditional, like, I'm going to run out of money, I need to talk to 50 VCs and make sure my pitch is correct. It was more, I got inbounded from a great firm saying, hey, we've heard good things. I shared our financials and they sent me a term sheet. And in hindsight, would I do it again? 100%. They've been great partners. But I will tell you that if you want to know about the challenges, the last 2 years, 2022 and 2023, were by far the hardest years I've had doing this. And I made a bunch of strategic errors. I made mistakes, a lot of mistakes. And, thank God, we are able to correct them. So 2024 is actually going really well, and we're profitable again. I've seen a lot of founders and a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of people get lost in the echo chamber of venture capital and of how it's supposed to look and how it's supposed to be. And where am I going with this? We spent 2 years building a product and engineering organization that was incredibly expensive. And it was an abject and complete failure, just a total failure. And I realized, somebody said to me when I was starting the business, a wise mentor I should have listened to, he said, if technology will help you get to 100 million in revenue, then you need technology. But the goal is not technology. The goal is 100 million in revenue. Whatever the path, the most efficient path to scaling your business is, that's what you should do. If you need tech to do it, if you need software to do it, fair enough. But I realized that we are not a software business, and me trying to become a software business, maybe other people are good at it. I'm not. So I can talk about that or anything else.
I love it. And I think you're certainly an independent thinker. And in there, I heard, not afraid to admit you got fired. Felt bad for investors.
Many times got fired.
Yeah, felt bad for investors, and the early years of entrepreneurship were not that hard. It's like the opposite.
The past couple of years have been way, way harder. In 2023 was the hardest year since I started doing this. And I can explain why, but
we'll go deeper into some of that. One thing that I'm really curious about is you certainly had your own experience, which seemed to shape the future of your sort of building communities, but you must have also seen other folks like Jason Lemkin and First Round and other people being successful there, maybe Sales Hacker and others. Who were the folks along the way who either inspired you, helped you learn from, and sort of shaping the view of like community is going to be a big part of the B2B mix in general?
Again, I wish at that time that like I was, in a back room with like a big map on my wall, like plotting out the future of B2B tech. That's not really how it happened, but yes, Lemkin and Saster were definitely an influence. Honestly, Pete Kazanji and Modern Sales Pros, that was like the first thing where it's like, oh, there's all these people and you can like get answers to questions and I want to be invited and can you add me? And I love, Pete is to this day more, he is more strict, and he runs a tighter ship than anybody about what is the nature of the conversation that you're allowed to have in MSP. So that was a big influence, I would say. And then, my background at GLG, which is an expert network business, we made a lot of money on events, and we made a lot of money on small group discussions and roundtables. And I started hosting these kinds of dinners, and then my good friend David Olk, who's now an investor, but he ran a company called Vore, and Vore did outsourced, white label thought leadership dinners for brands. And so Vore was one of the companies that initially planned a bunch of the Pavilion dinners, and that became, the way that we built and ran that dinner is very similar to a Jeffersonian dinner, if you're familiar with that model, which is basically one conversation, well moderated, making sure that everybody gets to speak around, a series of topics that are interesting, all within a confidential space. Those dinners, coupled with the idea of this MSP idea of how do we connect the global ecosystem, I think those were pretty big influences. And then I would say one of the other key drivers was just at the time, right? Again, to the point of the perils of trying to grow. But at the time, we were just so strict about our membership criteria. So you had to be VP or above. You had to be currently employed, no service providers, no CEOs or founders, no investors. It was the one club. And that was from, frankly, a first round dinner. I went to a first round CEO dinner organized by, I forget the guy's name, and Alexa Von Tobel was there, who did whatever it's called, LearnVest. That was the business that she sold to Northwestern Mutual. But anyway, and the guy had complained that I shouldn't be allowed to come to the next one because I'm not really a CEO. And I went to the CEO summit, the founder summit that first round had back in 2010 in San Francisco. And the whole time I'm I'm sick of treating these people like they're such gods. So in the true spirit of Robert Moses, I created a club that only I could join, so that those people we'd finally have a place where the CRO, the CMO, where they were the celebrities, where they were the champions. And that led to, exclusivity, led to FOMO, and led to people wanting to join. And, when you think about how do you grow a community, it's when people say, how do I build something like Pavilion? My initial answer is always, well, do you have 10 years? Because it takes a really long time to cultivate and nurture the right kind of people in the room with the right purpose and the right experience.
I feel like I'm hearing this theme, Sam, of one of the keys to building and maintaining, right, a great community is the quality of the membership and how that can be impacted by taking on outside investment, et cetera. How do you keep growing while maintaining the standards for admission and the quality and the impact of that community at Pavilion today? There's
two ways. So first, again, my point is slightly more nuanced, which is it's not that communities can't grow. It's that they are resistant to growth capital, meaning trying, the classic VC question in a boardroom is all right, well, this is your number with this much money. If I gave you 3 times as much money, how fast could you get there? And the answer is no faster because the instinct of trying to grow too much will corrupt the community and inevitably cause churn problems. And, some of the big name communities that have that roared out of the gates, I don't need to name them to crap on them, but all of them are facing really terrible churn issues. And it's just, the same thing that happens in any club. A club is always Bungalow 8 or Marquee. It's it's cool for a little while, but then they make all the money when they let everybody in, and then they shut it down because it's not cool anymore. So the point is, you can still grow a community. The way to grow a community is just by obsessively focusing on the member experience and really trying to remove an undue emphasis on growth. And that's what we did 2 things over the last, a year ago, we were unprofitable, and candidly, if I didn't do something, we were going to run out of money. We were going to go out of business. And my investors, who I appreciate their candor and their directness, at the beginning of 2023, we were looking at different growth trajectories, and I said, "What do you think it's worth?" Again, that's the other thing. My brain got corrupted by 2021, by the boom time and crypto and everybody getting rich and FTX, and I get money on the brain, which also is a really bad thing for a community leader. So I'm like, "What do you think it's worth?" I was always asking, "What do you think it's worth?" And they're like, "Well, it's worth this if you get to this number and you're break even." And I'm like, "Well, what if I don't get to that number? What if we're not break even?" They're like, "Well, then it's worth 0." And I was like, oh, okay. And they're like, and by the way, there's no more money. Just to be extremely clear, like we're not bailing you out. Like if you run out of money, that's it. And, we had a line of credit with SVB, but venture debt is a very strange thing when you think about it for companies that are burning capital. Like it should really not be a lifeline, because what's the point? If you haven't figured out how to be profitable, then all you do is give the company to SVB instead of giving it back to, your other creditors. So all of that is to say, last year I thought we were going to run out of money. And so I cut the size of the company. We went from 60 people to 30 people, and we became profitable at the end of last year. But also, we just became obsessively focused on the member experience, and really how do you scale a community? How do you grow a community? First of all, sub-communities, refocusing on the quality of the membership, making sure that, the community formula is pretty simple. It's the right purpose with the right people with the right experience. You do those three things it's not just the right people, and the right people depends on who your ICP is, but it's similar types of people that respect each other with the purpose, because a group of people just hanging out to, talk about buying IV drip franchises is not particularly interesting. So there needs to be a reason why we're all getting together, hopefully an inspiring one. And then the third one is like the right experiences, which can be in-person experiences or digital experiences. But the point is, like, the more you focus on that, the higher you get NPS, the higher retention will be. Then what you do is you architect it with word of mouth, and you make it easy to refer people. You make it easy to recommend, and you make it easy to share your great experiences. And it is truly, customer-led growth in that way. That's the first answer to the question. Now, to the point, does that mean we're going to triple, twice, double, 3 times? No, we're not. That is not a business that's going to triple every year, but that doesn't mean it can't be a great business. That just means it's going to take a while. So you're going to have to extend your time horizon if the community is the only thing that you do. Now, it doesn't have to be the only thing that you do. You can build businesses around the community that are unapologetic about their growth ambitions. The problem with trying to grow the community itself is that who wants to join a club that's like, we added 500 new members? Like, yeah, I met him. That guy was a real loser. And so there's always this sheepishness that comes from trying to grow a community too quickly. It's not that cool to be part of a club that's like massively trying to expand. But there are other businesses you can build. And so, for example, one of them, and if you're listening to this and want to compete, this is the playbook. So I'm telling you, education is a business that you can be unapologetic about growing. And so I'll tell you, like, one of the key lessons, we have corporate memberships, right? And we were selling memberships into Pavilion at scale, like, in bulk. And that doesn't work, because this is an opt-in organization. It's like selling gym memberships. Well, 3 people want to get in shape, but 20 people don't. So it doesn't really work. And so we saw really high churn. But what we're moving to is a world where the people that want to join the community at ZoomInfo or any large organization can. But everybody else, we've built these incredible learning programs. We have CRO School, CMO School, GTM Leadership Accelerator, which is a program specifically designed to get director level people promoted to the VP suite. Those aren't memberships, right? You don't have to join the community, but you can take the class. And you can be really well positioned to be a better employee, a better professional, to learn go to market. If you want to join Pavilion later, you can. But the point is, that is a business that you don't have to be apologetic about wanting to grow, because they're not joining the community. We've built these great learning programs for our members, and other people want to participate in them. And so so my point is, the community will be, I hesitate to call it like lifestyle, but it's going to take a while. Like, this is a 10, 20, 30-year business, because that's how you build something great, like YPO, Young Presidents Organization, or EO. That's how you do it. It takes a while. The education business, I think, can be scaled more rapidly. And, that's probably part of our 2025, 2026 growth plans.
I think it's a really interesting point that you make around the business taking a long time and having that like longer time horizon, because it takes meaningful number of hours and years to really develop out a community. I love that point, because if you think about the approach to community within a marketing team, like within a B2B marketing organization, I think one of the falters that some CMOs and CROs, if they sort of own marketing, take are not thinking about community within their organizations or as a discipline within their marketing function that they oversee as something that's going to take time and really needs to be nurtured. And there is sort of this longer feedback loop to whether or not it's working and being successful. I think it's a really interesting parallel between, like, doesn't matter if you do it as its own core business or it's within the context of your B2B function, like the same sentiment is there in both places.
I could not agree with you more. And the triangle, I think, is brand. I mean, brand and community are basically intertwined. And the what they really both represent is trust. And how long does it take to build trust? It's like, well, it takes a long time. And as human beings, we all know when people are trying to be transactional. And most CMOs try to build communities and they're like, we want to build a community for this tech. So let's get 500 people to sign up for free, and then we'll try to sell them this tech. And it's like, well, that's an audience. That's not really a community, and that's a key distinction, frankly, between some of the guys that have big podcasts or big audiences that then build communities. It's like a community is when those people all agree that they are supposed to uphold a certain standard because they are part of this club and they're proud to uphold their standard. And it's when the members are talking to each other, not when I'm talking to people. My stuff on LinkedIn isn't a community. It's an audience. I'm putting out content and people are consuming it. But within, Pavilion, people are helping each other all the time when I'm not present. And so, yeah, I agree with you. It takes a really long time. And that doesn't mean, I just think marketing in general takes a long time in the modern era. I think there needs to be this mix of short, medium, long-term emphasis around marketing programs. There needs to be demand gen that helps you hit the number today, but you got to always invest in brand. You got to always invest in a bunch of stuff that you can't really measure, but that by doing the right thing, even just karmically, that you're putting yourself in a position to win over the long term.
You started to touch on that, like, there's so much work that's going on in the background, and that's why Pavilion's so successful, right? You don't have to be in every dinner, every event, et cetera, right? The members are helping to improve and impact each other's lives. Do you have any sort of like specific success stories or, tales from the membership at Pavilion that, are your sort of favorite stories to tell? We'd love to hear a couple.
Well, I mean, I spend most of my week talking to members all the time. I mean, we've got a bunch of different resources. We're helping people find jobs all the time. Even just today, in August 7th, when we're recording this, we got an NPS score from a woman in Atlanta that's talking about how she finally found her peer group and she finally connected with people that she can share war stories with and learn from. And I immediately screenshotted it and texted it to Nicole Smith, who's our chapter head down in Atlanta, along with Jessica Garrett. We've helped people. We have a legal hotline when people are, departing a company unceremoniously. We help them out with negotiating severance appropriately. There was a guy that was leaving an organization a couple of years ago, and sometimes companies don't understand that pretty much in every state, you have to pay sales commissions. You don't necessarily have to pay an end of year bonus, but you do have to pay a commission. Commission is earned when the sale happens, not when you're at the company. And so but most people, many employers, if they're trying to be jerks, will not acknowledge that reality. And so this guy had a sick child that needed a lot of support and needed insurance, and the company was being very aggressive about not paying him the commissions that they owed him, which was hundreds of thousands of dollars. And after working with us, he ended up securing a $250,000 pay package, which wasn't going to be possible before. So but those kinds of things happen a lot. The stuff that makes me the most happy is just like these random encounters where, I'm finding, there's a Paris chapter and there's a Barcelona chapter and there's a Kansas City chapter. The idea that thousands of people are out there aligned by a common set of values, connecting and helping each other every single day, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Even when in the darkest days of, last year, when I was worried about the viability of the company, I still knew that Pavilion, the community, existed vibrantly, which was neat.
Wow. Oh, that's an amazing story about getting that support around severance and sort of leaving the company. Gosh, I'm sure there's like thousands of these.
I don't think that those stories are out there enough, Sam. You should put those on LinkedIn. You guys are like their advocate or their agent. It's like almost like I mean, it's an amazing example of, I think, where communities can go. Like, as part of the membership.
And sort of separately to that and integral to that, like, what does Pavilion start to look like maybe 5 or 10 years from now, sort of with this explosion of tech, these new disciplines, these new roles, and sort of the shifting of work, meaningfully within the revenue and marketing organizations?
That's a great question. I generally speaking, a couple things. The first is, like, I think community is a really interesting play, so to speak, right now for tech companies, because people are craving authentic in-person experiences. And one of the things that AI, I think there's a lot of great use cases for AI, all below what I would call the system of engagement. I think when you're using AI to write your emails at scale, you are making the world a worse place, probably. Maybe not definitionally, but my point is that the bad part of AI is massively increasing the volume of noise even more, all with banal generic messaging. The good part of AI is helping research, helping design better systems, helping give easy answers to questions that used to require a human being. So, but in that world where, more and more content is created by AI, the thing people will crave is authentic human experience. And that's where community comes into play, because that's what it is. It's about connecting human beings, connecting them in person, and doing that at great conferences and great summits, and also over dinners and drinks and coffees, and also, of course, online as well. So what role does AI play from my perspective? AI, I think, is really useful, like I said, at the system of intelligence layer, which is basically a way of saying, like, anytime somebody has a question that would historically been answered by, support.joinpavilion.com, some kind of help desk, some kind of support center where you file a ticket. I think a lot of customer support, specifically support, not customer success, but I think support will be mainly handled by AI. And I think if we're going to use AI, that's one of the places we're going to use it. Now, the second place we're going to use it is just around data enrichment and data augmentation. Less about, it's more just understanding, deepening our profile of our members so that we can serve them more effectively and efficiently. And that's, in terms of how Pavilion is going to use AI as a community, that's really like the key things that we need. And, one of the other piece about community, it's still, I'm not necessarily a software business, meaning I don't sell software, but I need technology a lot because I need data. And so I'll tell you, like, one of the key innovations that we built this year is this thing called GPS. And GPS is the Good Path Score. And the Good Path Score, because there's a path, right? There's like a progression that happens within communities. And the progression typically, you join a student and you leave a teacher, or you join a neophyte and you leave the grasshopper and the master, whatever metaphor you want to use. But the point is, a lot of community that has a lot of learning components to, a lot of the value delivery is heavily weighted towards the first year of membership. It's like the first year people have with Pavilion is amazing. But then after that, it requires a steady interaction and a steady engagement with all of the different experiences where people drive value. And if you lean back a little bit or you join for the educational piece, you become at high risk of churn, of course. And so the Good Path is a framework that we've developed, which basically says, like, here's the key experiences that people need in order to derive value from the membership. Now, we didn't have this data before because we were doing a lot of stuff in ad hoc systems that wasn't all integrated. So we spent the last year pulling everything into a CRM so that we had every piece of data around every kind of interaction, whether you went to a dinner, whether you went to a conference, whether you took a course, whether you finished the course, whether you logged into our member hub. All of that runs through one place, and then we can run machine learning against it and say, okay, this is our algorithmic, basically, member health or customer health score. And when you are veering off the good path, meaning you've gone quiet or dormant over a period of time, then we're going to give you an automatic We're going to give the human being that's managing your relationship an automatic guide that says, hey, this person probably needs to take this class right now because they haven't taken a class in 6 months, but they did go to a dinner. And so that's really more machine learning than I would say AI, but it is, we can't build a business that gives value to lots of people at scale without a heavy reliance on clean and good data running through a common system that can give clues, hints, and tips on proactive measures we can use to drive deeper engagement with the members. So that's the role that I think AI will play for us as a company.
Yeah, this is super interesting. Want to go a little farther on AI broadly in go-to-market, but also maybe some of your hot takes with how things will change for go-to-market teams. I think you made the point online that, possibly RevOps should roll into finance eventually, or there's probably structural changes around the way that the orgs should be laid out. Can you just talk through your free-form thoughts on how orgs will change in the age of AI and even just how they'll evolve broadly?
Well, I think that not necessarily because it's the age of AI, but really an era of constrained capital, is sort of like the more relevant part of it for me, which is, we've moved from a growth at any cost world where new logo acquisition was like the most important thing in the go-to-market organization. And that's why the CRO and the VP of sales were, the celebrities of the organization. And we moved into a world where, with interest rates at any reasonable level where capital is not abundantly available, the point of that is that near-term cash and near-term effectively retention becomes, we've all known that NRR is like the key driver of enterprise value for software businesses for a long time. I think we say it, but we still, if you go to the board meeting or you go into a pipeline meeting, it's still, everything's about new logo acquisition. Everything's about new business. It's still not enough about expansion. So I think one of the things we need to recognize is that like revenue generation in the long term is a function of retention, which means it's a function of delivering ongoing customer impact or recurring impact, which means that the sales team needs to be really closely aligned with the customer success organization, and there needs to be a common set of data. And then the other thing I would say is, there's I don't know if it's a hot take, but I don't believe that salespeople generate demand. I think salespeople should prospect a certain percent of their own pipeline because just to keep the skills sharp. But I think fundamentally, it's the combination of marketing, sales, and customer success that creates the machine, the go-to-market machine that can propel the company forward. And long-term growth can only come from retained customers. And so that means that the customer journey starts from the minute somebody hits the website or the minute they hear about ZoomInfo or Pavilion or any other product. And it goes through 4 or 5 renewals, right? We don't need one sale. We need 4 sales. The rep that closes the first new logo deal, that's just 25% of what we need to generate to make sure that we can recoup our investment on acquiring that customer. So my point is, we got to move away from this world where sales is like at the top of the pyramid and everybody else is sort of subservient, to a world where we all understand that revenue generation is a team sport and requires the coordination of all of the different departments. And what does that mean? That means that each of those departments doesn't get their own data. I don't mean like they don't have access to information. I just mean that, Millie can't have a different pipeline number than Ben, who has a different pipeline number than me, and we can't have different words for those things. We can't have different, our close rate's 20%. Well, I have here that our close rate's 13%. Well, who's right? We need one source of truth. And that's why I think, the point, it's a bit inflammatory to say like RevOps should report to finance. But my point is like RevOps needs to sit outside of a reporting structure where one department can use them as a hammer against any other department. That's sort of like the key point. So I think first you need a foundational data layer, and you need an objective third party that can arbitrate that data so that there's one source of truth. We need a common methodology and a common language, and we need a go-to-market approach that recognizes that all 3 of those departments are interconnected. That's what I would say is like what I which is all of it is like a really long-winded, as you can tell, I tend to be long-winded, but all of it is a long-winded way of saying like, if we can't keep the customer, nothing else works. It just doesn't work. And so we need to make sure that we keep the customer. The markets, I don't know of markets that are big enough where we can just burn through customers and throw money at customer acquisition if we're going to have really anything lower than like 65, 70% gross retention. And, you got to have over 100% net revenue retention if SaaS is going to work, if any of this idea is going to work. So
you said revenue generation is a team sport. I think I'm about to go get that on a t-shirt or put it up by my desk. I couldn't agree with you more as someone who's like run revenue generation motions for a really long time. And one of the key points of success for me was the ability to connect with leadership or create that stakeholder alignment between new and recurring revenue, the new business and that sort of retention and growth arm, and have them sort of get on the same page around how we were running these motions and that connective tissue there. Revenue generation as a team sport is my new slogan. So thank you for that. That's the best thing I got out of today.
My pleasure.
Sam, we could go all day. Your insights and your wisdom is I think, well received by our audience. This has just been an awesome conversation. We have a traditional last question that we ask everyone. We'd love to hear your answer to it. Who is the smartest person you've ever known, and what did you learn from them?
Oh, what a question. The person that was a key mentor for me that a lot of people don't know about, but he's sort of in the background of a lot of like big tech stories, is a guy named Jonathan Glick. And Jonathan was my first boss at GLG. And now he does a million different things. His wife is a very famous early stage investor in New York. Her name's Shanna Fisher. She invested in Coinbase and Notion and a bunch of other companies. But Jonathan was really a person that could, he taught me this phrase, think strategically, act tactically. He taught me how to connect a big idea to actionable takeaways. And he also helps, he lives in the future, he's sort of one of these guys that's like always thinking about what's going to happen in 5 to 10 years. And he's not always right, but it's useful to be around somebody that and he's just got a huge brain. He knows everything. So he has an opinion on politics. He has an opinion on world history. He has an opinion on who the greatest Roman emperor was and why it wasn't, Augustus, et cetera, et cetera. So, he's just somebody I learned he's such a, autodidact, he's so self-taught. And he also taught me just so much about entrepreneurship. And he was the person, by the way, I was at a breakfast in 2018 when I had left my last company. This was it. I was working on Pavilion full time. And I said, if this doesn't work, I can always go back and be like a CRO at some early stage company. He said, yeah, I think we've tried that experiment already. And sort of a burn the boats kind of moment where I'm like, I guess this better work then. So anyway, Jonathan Glick, you can look him up. He's not, super active on LinkedIn, but he's out there.
Yes, I just found him. It's awesome. And look, I think GLG has a lot of alumni who I think have gone on to build some pretty amazing things. So it's not terribly surprising. Well, Sam, this has been a pleasure to have you on the ZI Labs podcast. Where can people find out more about Pavilion, more about you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, of course, but you can find more about Pavilion at joinpavilion.com. And and you can ping me anytime if you need anything. You can email me, sam@joinpavilion.com.
I love it. Thanks so much for coming on. Hope you have a great day, and hopefully we can do this again sometime in the future. It's been awesome.
It's been great being here. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the ZoomInfo Labs podcast.
With new episodes dropping every Monday and Thursday, subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me and Ben on LinkedIn and visit zoominfo.com/labs to get in touch.